Welcome back to It's Not a Sport. So this is a new series that I want to start, where we're going to talk about mechanics and systems of video games and really be breaking them down. So welcome to the first episode of my breakdown series. I want to start with fighting games because recently I've been trying to pick them up, really learn the mechanics, and really start to understand what makes a good fighting game. We're going to be using the Guilty Gear Strive as an example for this episode of very simple fighting game mechanics. And I just want to go over general fighting game mechanics in this episode. And then in the second episode, go over mechanics that are unique to Guilty Gear Strive. The reason I'm picking Guilty Gear Strive, where ideally I would rather pick Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, since those two are the premier traditional fighting games, is because it saw the most people play it at EVO. It was the most hyped up, and it's probably the premier traditional fighting game at this moment in time. So first off, let's go over kind of like fighting game genres and what is like a traditional fighter, for example. So in my eyes, traditional fighters are 2D, now really 3D, but 2D fighters where there's two characters and they can move side to side, and there's a corner on each side. Just like Guilty Gear Strive, for example, Mortal Kombat, BlazBlue, I believe, of course, Street Fighter as well. Then you kind of have the tag team fighters, and those are more like Skullgirls and Dragon Ball FighterZ, where they are very similar to traditional fighters in essence, but instead of it being a 1v1 matchup, like Street Fighter, Guilty Gear Strive, you have multiple people on the cast that you can call in for assists and tag teams. Other than that, you would have your 3D fighters, such as Tekken, and I would say your 2D kind of for fun. I don't really know what I would call these types of games, but they're more like Super Smash Bros. Melee, where the goal of the game isn't to get the opponent's health bar to 0, such as the other fighters, but really it is to knock them off the screen. So, with that being said, let's get into standard traditional fighting mechanics, starting with Guilty Gear Strive. So first off, I just want to go over like what I would consider very standard mechanics in most video games. When you pick up a video game and you pick up a controller, it varies, of course, per genre, but you expect to have these mechanics, and people may overlook them. So, what are these simple mechanics? Well, movement. First off, walking. So, in Guilty Gear Strive, I can walk back, I can walk forward, I can crouch, I can jump, and those are kind of the basic mechanics. Other than that, we would go into, you have a health bar, as you can see at the top of the screen, right? And in most fighting games too, you have a meter, which is at the bottom of the screen, which allows you to do a special move of some sort, right? So those are very standard fighting game mechanics that I would call standard mechanics that are kind of in all fighting games that you would see. Next up, following that, is of course your buttons. So after movement, which we have your jump and all that, you have your buttons. And this goes into more combat oriented. So once you have your movement down, you get to, it varies of course per fighting game, but you have your buttons. So in Guilty Gear Strive, it goes by numpad notations, meaning that if you look at the bottom left of the screen and you see my controller inputs, each of these is on most websites is according to a numpad on a keyboard. So this is like 2, for example. The middle is 5, forward is 6, and etc. So you can look that up, and not all games use that, but most traditional fighters would do that to understand that. And then in Guilty Gear Strive, different again, varies per fighting game, but in this game you have your buttons, which can generally consist of like a light punch, and then a medium punch, and then a light kick, and then like a heavy kick, and then you can do like a heavy punch or something like that as well. In Strive, they switch it up a bit on you, where in this game you have your kind of your fast button, which is your P, which is always going to be like your fastest button, and then your K is generally your second fastest button, and then you have your slash, which generally changes depending on where you are, according to your position to your opponent. So if I'm far, I'm going to do this, which is a far slash, and if I'm close, I'm going to do a close slash. Then you have your heavy, or HS, which is kind of your equivalent of your heavy kick. It's not as fast, but it has really decent range, and it's good like poke option in a lot of these games. And then from there, you have your dust move, which is generally used for most characters in this game as an overhead, or like you can launch them in the air. It's a certain mechanic unique to Strive, or a sweep. So it's kind of like your heavy punch in a way for like most fighting games. And then, most also than fighting games, after you have your buttons, you will have some sort of block. This could be assigned to a button, or it could be just as simple as, in this game, it's walking back. So in this game, if I attack him, he's just going to block all of that. And really how he's doing that is just like in most fighting games, it's just you walk back, or you hold the corner back and you block low. So those are your basic kind of combat options in fighting games. Other than that, you may get more special movement options. Not all fighting games have these, of course, but it's standard. So if we go back to movement, you have generally a double jump, and you have a high jump, which for you jump higher. Let's see if I could do it. Yeah, there it is. Than normal, and you do that just by pushing down and then flicking it up real fast. However, jumping has a negative penalty to it, where it uses what I would consider kind of a fighting game stamina system, where most games you have a dash or a run-in in most fighting games, but this uses up kind of like your stamina, and it's not super safe. Giovanna in this game, in Strive, is kind of an exception, where she's like one of the few characters on the cast that actually has a dash rather than a sprint. If I switch over to Kai, for example, he has a run, which he runs into you rather than a dash. So that's kind of a unique mechanic to her, and it can vary per character that you pick or make. But also you can dash in the air. But if you dash in the air, it's a lot less like slower, it's more dangerous, and your opponent can get into you. So, and also if you double jump, then you can't dash in the air. So that's why I mean, like, as a stamina system, you can also dash back as well. So those are your standard, I think, core mechanics that you kind of need to make a fighting game. But you have to understand, in essence, what is a fighting game? Well, really, it's a very complex turn-based game, where you are fighting for your turn, essentially. So in the beginning, most people refer to this part of the game as neutral game, and you may hear that term, and you may hear out a term of playing footsies, right? Which is just as simple as, it gets its name from kicking. We're just playing footsies and scoping the game. And what you're really trying to do is get your turn. And what I mean by that, like, let's say I start the match, right? And I hit Kai here. Well, now I have momentum, like the ball is on my court, and that was my turn. Okay, so now Kai, on the other side, the other player can retaliate. And with fighting games, really the goal of it is, of course, to get your opponent's HP bar down to 0, but it is to keep your turn. And this goes in more into line of frame data within fighting games. Fighting games are really huge for that, where I don't know it off the top of my head, but you have to look it up. This move, obviously, being a lot faster, is faster in frames than this move, for example, which is extremely slow, right? Or this. If I mess this up, I'm losing my turn, essentially. So, just to give it like a quick example of, as you can see, like what a turn is in a fighting game, we're gonna turn the CPU on, and he's just gonna go ham on me, and I'm just gonna block by holding back, And you can see there, he whiffed it, and he gave up his turn. So now it's my turn. And then after I failed it, he took his turn and ended up DPing me. So, with that, that's kind of the essence of fighting games, where it's a really intricate and complex turn-based game, where each opponent is playing footsies to get an edge and on an opponent, take their turn, do their combo, and then try to continue to have the momentum in there with their turn, while the other opponent tries to take it back and have their turn. And that's the flow of a fighting game. And of course, the developers in different games give you different tools in order to take your turn or get out of someone's momentum in order to switch it back to your turn. I know I'm saying turn a lot, but that's the best way, I think, when you're learning fighting games and you're trying to develop one, to go back and look at it that way. So, now that we've gotten that out of the way, talking about most basic button mechanics and movement mechanics and meter, let's talk about moves. So, each character has a type of archetype. For example, I picked Giovanna here. Giovanna is a rushdown character. Her archetype is to get in and just beat you down. And she's going to have tools that are very, very, very good at doing that. So, we're going to look at the command list. Fighting games are very unique, and I think this is what frustrates a lot of people with learning fighting games, is your specials. And they're very unique inputs. So this is a quarter circle forward. This is a zigzag, which is generally referred to as a DP. And these are your special moves, your ultimate moves, your critical arts, whatever they call it. Each character has their own set, and it's unique to them, and it's something to really incentivize their class. Some are all around, like Kai is more all around, so he'll have a range or poke ability. He'll have a DP, I believe, as well. Yep, there it is. This is his DP, and he'll have a generally just a normal general attack half circle move, and then his ultimate as well. So with that in move, so the inputs, right? So Giovanna's a rushdown character. So what's gonna help her with her kit? Well, she wants to get in, right? So that's why she's one of the few characters in this game, when building her, have a dash. She has a higher walk speed than most people. She just walks faster. If you time it, just look how fast I'm walking to Kai compared to how slow Kai walks, right? She has a higher jump, I believe, as well. And then if we get even more technical, her behind-the-scenes stats are a lot different. This is how you go with weight class, where some characters are bigger than others. There's grapplers, which those are generally bigger characters because they have bigger health pools than Giovanna. I believe Giovanna has, in this game, for example, she'll have I believe she has the second highest health pool when she has full meter, because she has a very unique mechanic to her, which is that when she's at full meter, she gets higher defense and attack, I believe. Each move, of course, button does different damage. That did 28, where this will do 44, of course, and that varies per character's buttons. And the special moves, of course, have different mechanics. So what's Giovanna's special moves? Well, she has this kind of roundhouse kick, which is just quarter circle back K, generally used as a combo finisher, but it is super unsafe. She has a kind of a dash to get in, because, you know, she's a rushdown character. She wants to get in there, so she has a dash. She has an overhead, which in fighting games you can generally block high or low. In Guilty Gear Strive, for example, blocking low is very safe because most moves don't go overhead. So, for example, with that, if I switch to Kai to crouching and block first attack, if I hit him like that, or if I hit him low, oh, he's not blocking. My bad. There you go. I had the wrong setting. So if I hit him like this, he'll always block it. With the first attack. If I always hit him low, he'll always block it. But if I hit him above, he's not gonna block it. Well, he's gonna block it automatically because the AI set that way. But that's generally how fighting games work with terms of blocking, in terms of overhead. Generally, any jump move, any jump attack is going to be on overhead. And anything low is going to be below. And then anything standing is going to be, you know, you can block that just by standing. So with special moves kind of out of the way, let's talk about meter, right? Because I think that is probably the most second unique mechanic to fighting games. A lot of fighting games have meter, which is some sort of resource. Generally, it's made in resource management way in a game. You get it by either attacking or moving or jumping or just doing any action. And then when you get that resource, you can use it in some sort of way. In Street Fighter, for example, you use that with EX moves, but you also use it with Super. So Super is probably the prime example of a meter, where if I have meter, I can do my Super, and it will take 50 meter away, as you can see in like the bottom left. It may be hard to see because of the inputs, but that's kind of the general resource, where if you build these meters, it gives players more of an advantage to either finish their turn or take a turn back from an opponent and give the momentum more in their court. It's a way of balancing out the turns. Another way a lot of fighting games with turns is wake up. So a lot of fighting games will have things like recovery. You generally, in some games, you can get up quicker from recovery, get up slower. In Guilty Gear Strive, there's two types of recovery in this game. There's a hard knockdown. I believe that was like that, which he'll like stay on the floor for a while, and then there's a soft one, which he'll get up super fast. These different knockdowns, of course, change per you know, what type of move and inputs and combos you do, and they're a way of like indicating that your turn's over, I guess you can say, and that it's time for them to take your turn. For example, if I do a recovery, a very standard thing in fighting games, right, is to take back your turn, is DPing on wake up. You'll do this a lot. A lot of like standard people do this, which essentially after your turn, the enemy does their turn. You have to predict what the enemy's going to do next. You know, they may run up and hit you low, hit you high, hit you medium. They may try and grab you. Some people just do input the special move. So for example, if I do this and rush up to him and he DPs, I'm always going to get hit. And now the turn is in his move. And that's kind of what recovery and turns do in fighting games. But if I rush up and I predict it, well, then my turn keeps going. So just resetting that real quick. One, two, three. So the last really important fighting game mechanic that I want to talk about. We talked about health bars. We talked about your meter, your resource bar. We talked about your buttons. And we talked about special moves and like your ultimate move, and like recovery and how fighting games, the flow of it works with turns. I want to talk about grabbing. So most fighting games have this. You can it's just a simple input that you can do, and you can just grab your opponent and you throw them. This mechanic can vary greatly per game, I would say, where some people you can do it and grab them in place. In Guilty Gear, you're always going to throw them a direction, whatever direction you hold the input button to, whether that being back or forward. Guilty Gear also has a grab animation, so if you miss this, you're getting, you're losing your turn again. You're getting punished really, really hard. And then you can also air grab in this game. No, so not all games you can do this. Sometimes it's unique to characters. But if he jumps, I can air grab him as well. And then in the air, I can always hit him with certain buttons as well. Same thing applies as the ground with your buttons. It's the same thing in the air. So what is grabbing generally used for in fighting games? Well, it's used for blocking. So if they're blocking, and let's say he just guards all my attacks, right? I can't hit him. No matter what he's doing, I just can't get in, right? This dude has the best defense ever. He blocks everything I throw at him, right? Well, you just run up and you grab him. It's always going to get through it. No matter what he blocks, right? If I grab him, it's always going to get through. That's generally what grabs are used in fighting games. And I think they're very, very, very cool mechanic, but can be frustrating. So what do you counter that? Like, how do you counter a grab, right? If the opponent just keeps grabbing you, well, you have what's called a throw clash, where if I grab him and he grabs me at the same time, it's gonna stop it. So it's gonna negate it. And really, like in this fighting games, well, this is like really momentum. This is just something you learn as you go along. But to implement this mechanic is, I think, very important. So with that all out of the way, right? Let's talk about how I would do fighting games, right? What do you need to make a good fighting game mechanically and systematically? Well, for a traditional fighter, you need your health bars. You need one character. That character can have a resource meter if you want. I think that is completely optional. You need, I believe, 4 buttons. In reality, it can be just one. I think Footsies is a game that is equivalent to breaking down fighting games to its very simplistic, like, core mechanics. Where really Footsies is just back and forth, up and down. It's just basic movement and one button. That's all Footsies is just playing like this. So that's really all you need. And then from there, if you want to get more complicated, you can have your special moves like quarter circle, forward, half circle, and let's see if I can do it. Yeah, I did it. Your DP, your zigzag, and then you can have your special as well. So why did I say you only need one character? Well, you only need one character because Street Fighter is a prime example of this. Ryu and I believe Ken are just copies of each other. They pretty much have the same playstyle at essence, and that's because you only need, traditional fighter games are only 2 players, and you only need one special character on the cast to really do that, to do mirror matches and things like that. If you get that done, all those mechanics in, then that is your simple, like, vertical slice of your fighting game. And from there, you can get more complicated. You can add more characters, more special moves, and start thinking more about stats. So that's going to transition into more of our second part of the video, statistics and systems. So yay, this gets like super duper interesting and more fun. Alright, so here we are. This website is Dustloop. It's a very good resource for fighting games if you want to learn the mechanics and the playstyle and just how everything works for your special character or just a game in general. And we're going to look at Giovanna because this is who I picked. You can see on the right, she has certain stats, and all Guilty Gear characters have these stats. I don't think if you're going to make just a core fighting game that anything like this is super duper necessary. I don't think you need complex stats. You don't need complex damage formulas or anything like that. This is just systems to add more variety to characters to make them more unique, and again, very incentivized maybe why you want to play them and what character is strong at one thing versus the other. But if you're making one character it doesn't matter at its core essence if you're just making a very simple fighting game with mechanics. Now there are mechanics in games that, like in fighting games for example, that you may want, but again I don't think you need. For example, in this game, the more damage you do, the longer your combo is, the less damage it's gonna do over time. This is to prevent players from just 100 to 0 people with like the same button over and over again. You see this a lot in Street Fighter, where if you just do a fireball over and over again, it's gonna do less damage over time. There's also mechanics such in games as chip damage, where if the opponent just keeps blocking, and you keep attacking, it's gonna do small incremental amounts of damage to their health bar. In Street Fighter 5, you can look at this and you can see that they have when they're blocking, the bar turns gray, and if they get hit, then all their health disappears. But if they don't get hit, they don't slowly regen back up. That's chip damage. So anyway, Giovanna, again, we're looking at her stats. It's similar to Guilty Gear Strive. I'm going to go over kind of these mechanics more in the next video, where we're talking more about Strive's unique mechanics rather than just fighting game mechanics. But she has a defense value of 1.3, guts rating of 1, a pre-jump of 4, backdash, that's her backdash speed, her forward dash speed is 15, and her weight limit is light. Those all mean different things within the context of the game system, but that doesn't... Again, I'm not going to go over that in this episode. So, talking about Giovanna's moves, I talked again about how damage, startup, like frame data, and how that works for Giovanna specifically, and also hitboxes as well. This website shows it all to you. So her 5P, which is her fastest move, is a 4-frame startup, which means it takes exactly 4 frames for it to start up. That is very different compared to her 5K, which again I told you is her second fastest move, which takes 6 frames. It is active, which means it is out there, like it is on the field. You can take damage for it for 3 frames. It takes 9 frames to come back, and if you get if they block it, then it takes 2. And that is essentially this -2 on block plus 3 on block is the moves that incentivize your whose turn it is. How do you take turns? So, for example, and I may be completely wrong on this again, but this is -2 on block. Negative means that if the opponent blocks this and they have a move that is faster than or within those frames, it will beat it. So a worse move I would say is yes, her 6H is -10 on block. So if they block this and they can just hit you out of it, and you gives up your turn, it's over. But for example, something like her close slash is +3, which means that if they block it, you are safer if they hit a button for you to block it before while they're hitting their button. It's a safer option, for example. It doesn't give up your turn as much as 5P would. They also have their own hitboxes, as you can see within this image right here. The red is the hitbox where the opponent will get hit, and all the blue is where you can get hit. This varies per move, it varies per attack, and each thing changes per hitbox, per attack. It varies per character, of course, based off their size. Now, I think that if you are making a fighting game with the goal of it just being a vertical slice, having health, having one character, and just having them going back and forth, I don't think any of this matters too much. I think it's a good thing to keep in mind when you're making a fighting game, and when you get more in depth into it, even when learning a fighting game, it doesn't matter too much. It's good to know what abilities go into what abilities, what can combo into each other, what's safe, what gives up your turn, and what doesn't give up your turn. it's good to know these things and it's good to design these things, but just like stats with the hitbox too, I don't think it's super duper necessary when you're just making a very basic core mechanic fighting game. Again, this is what I said, we're getting into systems, it's a little bit more complicated. Another thing within fighting games is you can see right here they have Gatling options. This is, for example, what move leads into which move. So you can see 5P will Gatling into 5P again. It will Gatling into 6P, and it will Gatling into 6H. So for example, if I am doing 5P, it will go into 2P. It will also go into 5H. And then, so these moves will go into each other, but it won't go into 2D. See how slow that is compared to this, for example? So that's just kind of how Gatling moves, where it's just like, I think this is kind of a unique mechanic to Guilty Gear Strive. This doesn't apply to all games as a whole, but it's what moves go into each other. So I can do this, but I can't really do that. Like this is slow. But that's fast. That flows into each other. Where something like doesn't. And then I'll be giving up my turn more. This is very, very complex stuff. I think it gets more into technical system designs, where again, a lot of games you'll see this stuff behind the scenes with like damage formulas in a lot of video games. And it's very important to fighting games, and I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of people get frustrated with fighting games, because stuff like this matters a lot more than it would in a game like League of Legends, which has tons of tiny unique mechanics to it that don't really add up in the grand scheme of things. But now that we've covered all that, that's pretty much it. There's of course more in depth you could go into with its more systems design of fighting games, but that covers it. That's, I think, is all you need to really make a good fighting game and understand what it is. Just one character, you need maybe one button, your movement options, a meter and a health bar, and then from there you can start getting fancy and building out your characters, making them more unique in play style compared to other characters, and make a very good fighting game. You can just go into any fighting game, you can look at it, you can kind of study this. You'll see themes of fighting games, and these are really the fundamentals of it, because the mechanics are so solid since the arcade days, really. And that's why I think once you kind of learn one fighting game, it's very easy to pick up another one. And then from there, it's about learning that game's unique mechanics rather than learning the fundamentals over and over game of a fighting game archetypes. This can be applied to any genre of game. Shooters have, their mechanics that make up an FPS. MOBAs have their mechanics that make it a MOBA. This is just the foundation of gaming. Anyway, I believe this video is probably going on very long. It's, again, a very complicated, in-depth video that I wanted to talk about. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely want to do more of these. I want to talk about more of these, more archetypes, fighting game archetypes, and just things like that. I really like talking about mechanics, really understanding them, how they work, and I've had a joy learning fighting games recently. When I understood that as a designer that they are just very complex turn-based games, everything made a lot more sense on how fighting games operate and work fundamentally. As I go through this trial by fire, and I think fighting games is probably the very good episode to start this series off on. So, with further ado, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure to leave a like, follow, subscribe. Leave a comment of what games and mechanics you would like me to cover in the future. I would love to go over and do them. The next video after this should be the game mechanic video that are unique to Strive as a fighting game. So we'll get a little bit more in depth into Guilty Gear Strive's mechanics and systems, as if you want to really break down of what this game may be different compared to Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. Anyway, this has been your host, Salty Waffles, signing off, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful climb.